Hello. I'm not sure if this is going or not. So if you guys see me, there we go. This is progress. There we go. That's good. Hey, everybody. This is Kevin, the Canadian Hillbilly, and I'm a little bit out of focus. I'm going to try to make an adjustment here. Maybe that might be a little bit better, I hope. So, yeah, I got an hour to kill here, and I'm going to kill it with you awesome people. Thanks for coming and joining the chat. Thank you for the people who have subbed. I'm very appreciative to the viewers out there. I've been on YouTube now almost going on 2 years, just about to push 150 videos. So a little closer to almost 3 years, really. I've been doing a video once a week now for quite some time. And it's been quite the enjoyable hobby, but it's also been a little bit stressful trying to produce content in time and also deal with the managements of life. So I got a whole variety of rocks and coins and cool things to show you guys and tell some stories about adventures I've had along the way and a little bit of local history to my area in regards to mining and prospecting. Boy, I'm just looking at my massive collection of cool rocks and I don't even know where to begin. So I'm going to go with the stuff I have on my table and maybe one of the coolest rocks I got. This is a big slab of pyrite. The lighting is very, very direct in here. So it's pyrite in bedrock. And it's got great bands in there. I don't know if you guys can see all the individual cubes. My camera looks horrible from this angle, but hopefully it works. There you go. It's all the cubes in there. If I hold it further back, I don't. This light's very bright. I'm going to see if I can turn it off. That'll help. Now it's probably going to be too dark. You won't be able to see a darn thing. You can kind of see some sparkles in there, eh? Yeah. I'm going to go put the light back on. It's been an incredibly gray, miserable day here in northern British Columbia, where I live in Mackenzie here. With that being said, it's the weather's been quite interesting as of late. The other day, I went out to my claim and to observe the carnage because there was a massive spike in the water flow, and it ice jammed pretty aggressively. Where I go panning in my bay, if you have ever watched any of my videos I've done out in the Nation River, it's a beautiful little bay. It's very sheltered. It's a narrow, tight canyon for about maybe half a mile upstream, and the bay it just widens right out. All the gold just drops out in this beautiful little spot. Where I pan, it's like a shelf, and there's a back eddy that swirls around. So when it's peak flow, all the gold gets deposited on top of this little ledge bench of bedrock, and then it back eddies around over top of that. And so all the light stuff blows off, and the whole area is just full of black sands. It's just and fine gold. Like it's rare you can get one pan there and you don't find any gold in it. It's pretty cool. So I'm gonna work my way into some fossils. I got a bit of a scallop shell here, and these are numerous in the Pine Pass. That's in one of my many videos I've done was fossil hunting out in the Pine Pass. Here's another excellent example of that, and they are numerous. They're thick. There's just a huge abundance of them up there. When you hammer open the bedrock that contains these fossils, the natural gas comes out of there to the point where I've actually been able to light the natural gas on fire before. It's so rich and abundant in this specific location. Now we're getting into a leaf fossil right here by my finger. Barely, but that kind of shows it a bit. Boy, this light kind of sucks. There we go. Excellent. So we got that leaf, and then here's another leaf. It's a little bit bigger, and this one's kind of cool because it's almost like a two-part mini series. It was a slab of rock that I was able to fracture off and get that little section of leaf out of it, and you kind of see it's right here at the tip of my finger. And here's the piece that I broke off that contains the mirror image of that leaf. It still has the vein structure in it. It looks really cool. What else have we got for cool rocks? Oh yeah, another one of those dang fossils from the scallop shells. This one's really cool because it's almost very three-dimensional. You can see that one scallop shell in there really well. It just kind of pops right on out of there. It's really neat. It's something that whole area. It's really accessible. It's easy to get to. It's right on Highway 97, just north of the campsite of Heart Lake. So it's between Mackenzie and Chetwynd on Highway 97. It's a very cool little location. So let's see here. What's next on here? Oh, yes. Here is a little piece of carnelian agate that I got on the Parsnip River, which is about 15 kilometers south of Mackenzie. That was my first agate I ever found there, and it's super soft and smooth to the fingertips. It's quite nice. I got another little carnelian agate up here too that I got almost. Wow, I dropped it. I got it though. There we go. Another little one there that I found almost in the same location. It's almost like they came from the same host rock. Now I got rocks I found, and then I got some mineral specimens that I've purchased over my years. And this little guy here is a garnet, and it's quite fractured. I believe this was given to me from a friend of mine. It was obtained in Ontario. Okay. Oh, and then I got a bunch of other little garnets, and these little guys here come from my Nation River claim, and there is a ton of garnets there. About 4 kilometers upstream, there is a creek that flows into the Nation River, and that little creek, probably about 10 to 15% of the material within the creek is garnet. I've gone in there and done prospecting and panned it, and it was just more red sand than there was black sand and very little gold. But the garnets were really, really cool. And here's a little bit of some gold porn. This is an example of the super fine powdery stuff that I get out of my Nation River claim. That's just shy of 2 grams. There's a couple little tiny pieces in there that are a fair size. And you get about 30, 40 colors per pan is general. I went out on November 8th in a nice warm patch, and I dug it was near the end of the day, and I was getting tired, and I dug a spot that kind of intrigued me. And I put the dirt in the pan, and I panned it out, and I got one of the best pans I've ever gotten on my Nation River claim. I ended up staying digging for another 2 hours, and did pretty good that day. I still got the dirt downstairs. I still got to do the clean out on it, and looking forward to seeing what I get on that one for results. I'm just gonna go through and have a look at what some of you guys are typing here. Yeah, just hi, and to everybody that's here. All things country, gentleman prospector, Ed, Mandy, Mr. Lodak, all things country, prospector Jason, a friend of mine, BC Treasure Trails. He's another Mackenzie boy here. He might be popping in here a little bit, but he is on the road. So if he does, awesome. If he can't, I'll forgive him. Yeah, here's more gold porn for you guys. This is what I do with my gold every year. I melt it down, and I make myself a little block. And this is just getting close to being almost an ounce. So once I get that ounce in there, I'll keep this as a 1 ounce block. Purity in it's probably around 22 karat, I'd say. You look at the coloration difference between actually the gold in the vial and the pour, and the gold in the vial, I'd say, is probably even more pure than what's in the block. So, and this block here, it's been filmed numerous times. Even when I poured it was good. I got another one here, another little button here. This little guy here, that belongs to my daughter Maggie, and she's an active little gold panner. I'm very proud of her. She's actually got some pretty good instincts and skills when it comes to finding the shiny. Not last summer, summer before that, we went to Quesnel for the gold panning championships down there, hosted by Shane Wright of the Rediscoverers, and she entered in the competition to go gold panning. Now, she was the only child that entered in the gold panning competition. She was also the only female that entered in the gold panning competition. She got third place. What a proud dad, I tell you what. You know, I mean, like, you can't get better than that. And also on that day, she met Dan Hurd. Freddie Dodge was there. It was a great turnout. It was a great event. Had lots of fun, great prizes. It was a fun day. Let me see. People that donated prizes for that event. We had Mark Ollenberg from Coldstream Placer Supply. He's got a YouTube channel as well. Some of the stuff that Mark has done actually up in Jurgensen Landing and Manson Creek, historical videos are just really cool because Jurgensen Landing was in the 1870 gold rush in my area, and it's almost a forgotten wayside to the point where the equipment is still out there. You can walk around the bush and you'll find artifacts that are over 150 years old. It's just been awesome. You got, hydraulic monitors from when they were, working the hills with that. In 1868, they ended up hauling a steam shovel over Mount Baldy from Fort St. James, a distance of 150 kilometers. So, like 75 miles in the wintertime, one piece at a time, to reassemble this piece of equipment and use it for several years. And the damn thing is still up there outside the Hudson Bay store, which is the original Hudson Bay store going back to 1868. Their museum there is utterly cool. I have been able to get up there and do some filming on it just because it's a good ways up there. It's about 3 hours north of where I'm at. And I would want to spend some serious time up there if I had the opportunity to do it. Great history up there, though. I got several books about it. Actually, I'm going to dig out one of the books here. If you guys have a chance to find it, highly recommend you give it a read. This is the book. It's called Gold Seekers by Ralph Hall. And it's basically all about that him going up there and mining pre-World War II, but it's also the whole backstory of the area that led up to it. Fascinating read. Yeah. It's one of those books where you don't read very often. You're still going to rip right through it right quick because it's so good. And that there is about Jurgensen and Manson Creek area. A really good book. Okay, what else we got? Okay, I'm going to dive into some coins here. So this is not really a coin. It's more of a poker chip from Almanica Mining Society, which Mark Ollenberg is a member of, and my friend Mitch Mortensen, or he's recently changed his last name because he found he's a Greek citizen, and it's very difficult to pronounce. So hopefully he watches this. He'll give me a hard time. I'll know if he does watch it because he will give me a hard time. So I'll just leave that out there as bait. And also, I got myself a really snazzy 1 ounce copper coin. That's 99% pure. And that was a prize from actually Shane's panning competition. So is the poker chip. That was in Quesnel. So if any of you guys are in BC and you have a chance to go to Quesnel for that, I highly recommend it. It's great. We're coming up to my next coin. Man, this one's for you, Ed. You might look a little familiar, buddy. There you go. That's another one of my little collection that I'm proud of and I keep very close. Now we're getting into some coins that were actually in circulation that are not sounding like regular coins because they're made out of damn silver. So that's one of the things to look out for in your coins is be aware of what coins were minted in what year that are actually have a silver content or pure silver, because some of them are silver. And this is a quarter, Canadian quarter. That is, I think it's 68% pure. Let me get the old magnifying glass here and I'll tell you the date on it. Got to rotate it around. Where is it? 1957. So if you ever find a 1957 Canadian quarter, save that guy. And my other coin I got here is a nickel. And this guy, oh geez, I didn't realize this thing was that old. Huh. It's a 1923 Canadian nickel. And this guy here, that's another silver coin. I didn't realize it was that old. Then I got some other coins. These are ones I actually purchased online, so I'm not even sure if they're authentic or real, but they are definitely brass. And you can probably tell where they came from. And I usually, I got a good little chunk of those, and I give them to my kids in stocking stuffers every year. Now we're on the topic of stocking stuffers. Another thing that's quite common in the area I live, just north of me, is this stuff. Anthracite. Metallurgical coal, the stuff you add to iron to make steel. So you need a little coal for their stocking. That's where you go. Put this rock off to the side because it's really dirty and messy. This is another interesting rock that I got out of my Nation River claim, and it's a calcite crystal, but it has a geode kind of like happening there. It's got teeth. And you see the crystal formation in there, and you see one of my dog's hairs in there. Ruthie the Wonder Mutt strikes again. Set this guy up to the side. It's quite heavy. I also have a jar of, and you'll come across calcite crystals as you're panning up there too. And they're very, very unique. And they stick out like a bloody sore thumb. Let me just hold this up here and see if we can get a better angle. I might just crack this little jar open and pour a bunch of them into my hand. Do that. There's a couple here really interesting. They got great shape. And some of them have actually crushed right down next to nothing. So I'm going to grab this camera here. So brace yourself for the earthquake. There we go. You got the calcite crystals there. And you can see the facets in there. They form up really well. They're really beautiful looking little rocks. Unfortunately, the camera's not focused that well because it's so close to it. But yeah, some of them got great shapes to them. You can see the crystallization to it. Now I got to juggle this and put it back into the little jar, which is the pain that I live in. Oh, geez, come back here, guys. Don't fall away. There we go. Put these away. Now, panning in northern BC, you got all sorts of hazards. You can slip, you can fall. There's wildlife out there. I've seen a fair share of grizzly bears. I've been so close to grizzly bears a few times in my life that I was able to smell their breath. One time that happened to me was actually up in my cabin up by Powder King, which is in the Pine Pass by a local ski hill up there. And beautiful fall morning. And I listened to music inside the cabin. I let my dog outside to go pee, and she goes up the little ways and stops and goes pee, then stands up and walks backward into the cabin. So I'm curious as to what initiated this behavior. So I walk out there. Like I said, it's early in the morning. I'm still in my jammies, my underwear, holding a cup of coffee and just a pair of shoes on. And I look up the trail, and here comes a little grizzly bear cub, probably about 150 pounds, about the same size as me. It comes down, gets about 10 feet away from me, and veers to the right, goes down beside the cabin. I'm like, oh boy. I look back up at the trail. Here comes another cub. It comes down the trail and it veers right, goes around the cabin the other way. And I look back up the trail, and I was going to look over at the other cub. And as I look back up the trail, here comes Mom at full speed, full charge. And she hit the brakes and sprayed rocks all over me. She stopped less than a foot away from my face. She was standing on all fours, and she was taller than me yet. I'm about 5'10", and she was almost 6 feet tall, looking down at me. She was about over 4 feet across at the shoulder. And yeah, I just remember looking at her lips snarl, teeth, just as long as my fingers. And I was really glad she decided not to use me as a training toy for her cubs. The only option I had was to throw my cup of coffee at her, but I didn't want to aggravate her. So when she hit the brakes, She's looked right at me, and then her cubs distracted her attention. She looked at one, she looked at the other, and then right back to me. And then I started walking backwards in my cabin, closed the door, and cranked up AC/DC, and that was that. So that was the first time I've been that close to a bear. Another time I've been close to a bear was I was driving my vehicle, and there was cubs on the road, and I drove up to where the cubs were, and they moosed off the road, and then out of the ditch comes Mama Bear, and she full speed jumped out of the ditch, jumped up beside the side of my truck, and I had the window down so I can get a better view of the cubs. Dumb thing to do, really dumb thing to do. And yeah, she let out a big woof at me, and I could smell her breath, and it was really gross. And she turned around, collected her cubs, and ran away. Generally, the only time you'll have problems with wildlife in the bush is when you scare the crap out of them. They don't know you're there, or they're protecting their food. So always make noise when you're in the bush. Be aware of your surroundings. You know, bears are just one potential thing. Another thing we got to watch out for out there, guys, is slipping and falling on rocks, going into a river. Even up here in northern BC, you know, falling through ice on a river is potentially dangerous. I've done it. I've when I was a younger guy, you know, geez, I think I was about 10 or 11. Me and a couple of friends, we went out in the bush and we were walking across a creek, and I fell through the ice, and the current was very strong and pulled me in underneath the ice, and about 100 feet downstream, there was a hole, and I was able to pop up through that. And my friends honestly thought I was gone, but then it was a long, arduous hike back into where the tub was to warm back up. And yeah, like they pulled me out of the water. I pulled myself out of the water, and then we got a fire going, and the fire was not good enough. So everything got put back on the body, and we ran into where the town was, and I was moving fast to generate the heat, and that's probably what saved me. That and multiple layers of clothing. And so, you know, be careful when you're on the ice. Be careful when you're around a river. Just the other day on Thursday, I went out to my claim and investigating that massive ice jam. That was just phenomenal. I've never seen anything like that. The ice jam was blocked off the river. The ice flow is about a half mile long, about 25 to 30 feet thick. At the end of the straight stretch, the ice wall was probably about 80 feet high. It was just insane. Half the valley was blocked off. And then me being foolish, I still went down to the bay to check out the panning. And I found the area where the spring is, because that's where the ice was weak. And I punched a hole through the ice. Luckily, I knew whereabouts I was and knew the water would only be about 3 feet deep. But when it's December, you don't want to be in 3 feet deep water. I was wearing waterproof clothing at the time. I got out of the water. My socks weren't even wet. So that was a huge bonus. But the area was blanketed in snow. When I got there, I was hoping that the surge of water would have swept all the ice and snow away, and it did not. So once I got down there, I realized that it would be hard to dig. There was nowhere to really pan except for the hole that I just punched through the ice. And I figured, you know what, given how much ice is upstream there, something to rip loose. The banks are so wet and slushy and slimy, and my boots are so crappy and poor, I wouldn't be able to get out of there in time. So I just aborted. It was a fun adventure, though. Normally it takes me about an hour to drive up there. This trip was about 3 hours up, because the road was a sheet of ice covered in water. And there was no sanding on it. They're all bush logging roads, you know. Everybody just throws chains on their vehicle. I did have chains. I didn't put them on my truck. I have 4-wheel drive studded tires. I figure, you know, if I need to put the chains on, I'll put them on, because it's a little time consuming. The last 3 kilometers of the trip, or a mile and a half, I had to use my quad, which I brought with me, which it has chains on it. And there was about maybe 6 to 8 inches of snow on the road, and I zipped up there with that. And I tell you what, if you guys like going out and playing in the mud with your ATV, go out in the slush. It's just as much fun as mud, but it's clean. You don't get dirty. It's quite refreshing. It's nice. back to the rocks. I'm gonna grab my gold pan of good stuff here. Just put it up on the table. Sorry for the big thud. Here's an interesting rock that you guys might find neat. Now this rock, it came out of Sovereign Creek, and you can see how it's just a matrix of quartz crystals. Well, stringers anyways. It's really, really neat to that area. There's a few of them around there. We were finding quite a few of them. And it's all ironstone that's in between there that had oxidized and rusted out. So this area here is a very rich gold bearing area. It's Lightning Creek. It flows into Williams Creek, which is up near Barkerville. Here's a sample of some copper ore that I found near my claim on the Nation River, and it was just green. It was you could see the copper in there. It's a fairly nice stone. And here's a rock that's very similar to the one I got on the Nation River, or similar to the one I got at Lightning Creek, but this one was found on the Nation River. And it's really light. It's so porous and just, it's almost like volcanic popcorn. Very different. And we're getting into some of my agates. These guys are pretty neat. These agates, they were all found on the Fraser River in Prince George. And that is also another video that's on my channel. Another thing that's quite common in my area too is jade and nephrite. Lots of that. I got slabs up here. Actually, just got the notice on my Facebook thing there. It was 3 years ago that I ended up cutting those slabs. Oh, grab this. Show you the slab here. There's the slab there of nephrite jade. And I backlight it, which I don't really have a light because my phone is somewhere and I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is. Just light this up and you see how it just kind of glows through there. That's one thing I need to do, is actually go back out to my shed and do some cutting on some rocks. I didn't think I'd be able to fill up this much time just showing off rocks, and I'm already halfway through this live stream. It's kind of funny. This is another rock that I got on my Nation River claim, and it is straight mica, but it's also got garnet crystals in it. You can see a little bit of red there, and that spot, this rock obviously came from that creek that's about 4 kilometers upstream. Another thing that's quite common is conglomerate, just rocks that are just speckled and held together with calcium carbonate. Another thing that's common to the area too is you get the occasional bit of this, and that is lava rock. Yeah. And the Nation River has all sorts of really, really interesting rocks. Along Williston, you'll see all sorts of stuff, and it's the color pattern and texture. This one I found very interesting. It's green and spotted. It's really cool. Here's another cool one that I ended up putting through the polisher, and this one, it almost looks like jasper and jade mixed together. It's really neat. I'm not jamming on this light. I wonder if I can get a little shading happen there. Oh, just the right amount. Yeah, you can see the green and the red to it, eh? Very interesting. You can put that one away. Set these guys down. All right, time for the next pile of stuff. So this is a steel ball from a ball mill, and that was actually found in oh geez, where? I think that was the Fraser River, which wouldn't surprise me because there's all sorts of stuff there. Actually, yes, it was. No, it wasn't the Fraser River. It was the Quesnel River, but it was less than a kilometer away from the confluence where the Quesnel River goes into the Fraser River. Yeah, show you a little container here of now that's minus 60 mesh of straight magnetite, black sand. I got pounds and pounds of this thing. I probably got about 10 containers of this stuff downstairs. And I separate it all and I screen it all and I save it all. Just one of these days I'll use it for some sort of hobby. I don't know. All right. And that stuff's very, very heavy. Some other cool rocks I got over here. I'm gonna just grab a bunch of them. So this guy here, it's all full of neat, interesting little crystals and sparkles. It's got great coloration, red and blue, and all sorts of things going on in there. This is a very unique rock just because of the leopard spots on it. I don't even know. I honestly think it's a type of mutton fat jade, but it's very interesting. There's all sorts of really cool rocks along Wilson Lake and the Nation River. You can go out there in the springtime when it's low, and you can find all sorts of really interesting things. There's a spot maybe about 2 hours north of me where you can find arrowheads and stuff like that go back before the 1700s. I've got all these rocks up top here I didn't even get into yet. Let me see here. Here we'll start with this. How about that? Some cubes of pyrite. These guys we get them from our a claim that I let lapse. We poked at it really hard and we took out a bunch of material. Then they ended up building a roadbed there and buried our dig site, which really sucks. Another thing that's really cool about my Nation River claim is black sand. It comes from rocks like this, and this is magnetite, and it's magnetic to the point where the magnets stick to it. Yeah, grab a magnet here and stick to it quite well. It's almost like steel. It's really, really interesting. I should almost just throw that coal in with that black sand and see if I can make some metal out of it. I got so many interesting little samples and goodies up here. Now, I believe that is arsenopyrite. It's black and crystally, and also got jade crystals in it, or not jade, pyrite crystals, and it's really shiny, really cool. That was another one I found on my Nation River claim. Go back over onto this side of the pile. This here, I believe, is a chunk of bone that's been fossilized. That was found on the Fraser River. And then we got another piece of that malachite, I believe it is, but this is that's also out of the nation. And you can probably hear my daughter in the background there playing with the dog. It is what it is. God bless her. Now, speaking of malachite, the daughter, this is a piece of malachite she actually found, shaped like this, polished. And where she had found it was in Hickson, in a grassy location. We didn't know exactly what it was, and her eye caught it. And yeah, it came home with us. And that was on our trip back from that gold panning competition a couple of years back that she found that. And I've been polishing rocks and doing other things here for quite some time. And always save your little bottles, the little skinny ones, because it's a great way to put polished rocks into. And there's an amethyst in here. There's all sorts of cool things going on here. One of the neat things I also bought was for my daughter is one of these little guys here, and it shows you all the different gemstones. It's really cool. I highly recommend if you guys ever see something like this, scoop it up, because now you got like a reference guide. You can just have a look at something and you got it right there at the tip of your hand, which is really, really handy. Back to the cool looking rocks up here. Well, have a look at this. You know what that is, I'm sure. Any geologists out there know? Malachite and azurite. Blue is the azurite, green is the malachite. And again, Nation River and Wilson Lake has some really interesting rocks. Uh, that's my, I call it a dragon head because it kind of looks like a dragon head. All sorts of very interesting things up there. Here's another rock, or rocks. The rock in the middle here that's embedded, it's totally different than the rock around it. So how it got there, I don't know. Let me see here. I got some BC opals in here. Very little chunkies. And I also have a jar of peridot. Yeah, green gemstones. And I got another jar here. I forget the name of these rocks, but they actually go pinkish in ultraviolet light, and when the light goes dim, they change color. They actually go back to a white. So the longer they stay underneath the light here, the darker the purple pink they get. It's really neat, and the change is almost instantaneous. It's really interesting rock. I got a little write up about it, and it's up here somewhere. Let me see here. Rocks that I've cut, that I've polished, that are just really neat grain structure in it. I wanted to make dice out of that. I still got 2 other cubes up here. Yeah, we'll look, see what else I got. Oh yeah, there's another one. This one has a vein of peridot in it, crystals. That's really interesting as well. Oh, here's another good one here. I was telling you about the calcium, the crystals I get at my claim there on the Nation River. Here's an example of the geode, and you find the stuff all around there. Generally, it's deeper in the bedrock that you got to dig through up the fractured bedrock, and you'll come across pockets of the stuff deep inside the bedrock. It's really interesting. What else we got up here? Lots of the pyrite stuff are from where we were digging there a few years back. And the interesting part about this stuff is really close to where I live. And it's really interesting. A great location. It's nice little ATV drive, and you're right there. Like lots of really cool sparkly rocks there. You're driving along, you notice it. My wife's actually the one that discovered the pyrite there. I was down in a creek panning looking for gold that was non-existent. I couldn't find anything there, but she was finding stuff. Here's another rock that's basically a part of a peridot. Tall top end up here is all peridot. It's all green and sparkly. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so my area, it's kind of neat. It's the town I live in is 60 years old, but there's been prospecting going on here since the 1870s, and the history up there and around in the area is really cool. One individual, his name was Peter Toy. He came up here in 1863, and no, 1864. I'm sorry, and he found a little spot just where the Omnica River flows out, and it was on the opposite side of the Finley River. And on that bank, he was digging down through about 3.5, 4 feet of dirt. Then he got into a gravel bar, and he was working that gravel, and just with the hand rocker, he was getting 2 ounces a day to himself. That was back when an ounce of gold was less than $30. And that location is still there, but unfortunately, since they built the largest reservoir in North America, it's underwater and probably underneath a heck of a pile of silt. But he dug gold there for over a decade, getting 2 ounces a day in a 180-day season. He ended up dying in a canoeing incident on the Omnica River in Black Canyon, which is another interesting character. Samuel Black is the guy that Black Canyon was named after. He came here in, that would have been the Alexander Mackenzie Exploring Party, which would have been 1593. No, not that late. It was, I forget the rough date on it exactly, but he explored this area, went to Victoria from here. Once he got to the west coast, he went through the Skeena River, down south along the coast of British Columbia, Canada. Spent a little time in Victoria. From Victoria, he hopped on a boat, went to San Francisco. From San Francisco, he went to Southern California, checked out the old gold fields there on his route to Taos, New Mexico. When he was in Taos, New Mexico, he heard about the uprising in Texas and went to Texas, and he ended up dying in the Alamo the next summer. Really interesting history, to have a guy that walked through the bush where I go, and within a year of him being there, he was down in Texas. The amount of ground that the old timers traveled, and by the means that they could travel, was just absolutely phenomenal. I have so much respect for the old time prospectors who carried everything they needed with them on their back. Here we are nowadays, we're going out with a pickup truck, a camper, and all this fancy gear and getting a little bit of gold. And these guys are out there just crushing it, getting ounces, it's really, really interesting, the history. Manson Creek, Jemison Landing, the Nation River, where I go gold panning on, it is phenomenal. Even the bay where I mine, I haven't found any artifacts, but the upstream about 20 kilometers, there's an old Aboriginal settlement that goes back, thousands of years. And walking through the area, you know whereabouts it is. The tree growth is just different in this particular area, and I walked it on foot. We didn't find any artifacts there because it predates colonial settlement, so there's no iron there. It's all stone tools. Where I'm at on the Nation, I have a suspicion that it was worked by the Chinese in the late 1800s because of the growth of chives and other things that are not local to the area. But it's kind of handy because, I go down there with a roll of tin foil, a little bit of butter and a fishing rod, and put the bobber out there and go gold panning and catch a couple fish and cook the fish on the fire with some chives and butter. And it's a delicacy. It's really great. That's one of the things I really like about this area. And I've been up to my claim before for a week at a time. And there's no traffic that goes on the road. You're remote. During the day, you don't get anything on the AM FM radio. Your cell phone doesn't work there. I got to use everything off of satellite communication. So it's very interesting countryside, and the history there is phenomenal. Even Phillips Creek, which is just flows into the Nation River upstream of where I'm at, is a rich gold bearing creek. And that goes back to the 1880s when that was first pilfered. And so the history there is going on really, really, really long now. And it's very interesting. And I'm glad I'm finding gold in my location. The pan I had in November was just phenomenal. I hope I can get more. I don't get too much at a time, I'm really disappointed with my 104 buckets because I didn't even get 2 grams out of it. I've gone up there with Shane, my buddy, before, and we high banked before for a weekend. We got 5 grams, and that was a heck of a great trip. I was so pumped for that. I even sent Shane home with the whole chunk of gold. I was just happy to have a friend come out and go gold panning up there. I've offered to take people out to the location, and it's so remote and I live so far remote too. It's not an easy to commute to get up here, and that it's rare I get people to come out there and go gold panning. So when I have an opportunity to take a friend out there, I really enjoy it. Scott Creek. Now, there's an interesting thing about Scott Creek. It's on the other side of Williston Lake. And, almost actually, it's a little under 100 years ago now, there was 2 trappers. One was Scott. The other name was Weston. And they lived about 12 miles apart. And each creek flowed into the Parsnip. And they would squabble back and forth because Scott kept on messing up Weston's traps. And what happened was Weston left a note in his cabin saying that, I'm going to go down, talk to Scott about him harassing my traps because Scott was taking the furs from Weston. So Weston went down to Scott, and either he didn't make it or Scott killed him. More than likely, the ice collapsed underneath him. He disappeared. The Northwest Mounted Police investigated it. They took Scott's firearms away for I think 6 months, and then they returned them to him because you live in the bush, you need a gun. And Scott stayed there for another year. Then he disappeared. And then 6 months after he disappeared, there was another character that was raising trouble in the Northwest Territories with the same MO. And nobody knows exactly who this guy was because they never did catch. Well, they did catch him, but they couldn't identify him. That was the Mad Trapper of Rat River. He was a trapper that went up there. He was very antisocial. He was messing with his neighbors' traps, being basically quite belligerent and rude to everybody in the neighborhood. He was very wealthy, had a bit of money, and well, the cops decided to go to his cabin and ask him what was going on with him trapping, and all hell broke loose. The Mad Trapper opened fire on the RCMP members. One of them was injured. I believe he ended up dying. The cops retreated. They went back to the local community, which was, almost a week hike through the bush to get away. They regrouped with more officers, more supplies, and they went back out to confront Scott. By this time, the Mad Trapper. By this time, the Mad Trapper had fortified his cabin and made shooting holes from it, and all hell broke loose. They opened fire on him. He wouldn't come out. They knew he was in there. They ended up blowing up the cabin with dynamite, and the Mad Trapper fled on foot. And it was the largest foot chase in Canadian history at the time. The story of how they caught him was very interesting. They had Wap May, who it was just after World War II. And Wap May is famous for shooting down the Red Baron over Germany. Actually, no, it would have been World War One. I'm sorry. So that would have been like 1915, 1920, somewhere around that timeline. And he ended up hiking, like a couple 100 kilometers, going over a 5,000 foot high mountain range in the wintertime. Just insane survival skills that this Mad Trapper possessed. And they ended up finding him on a river, and they shot him. And the weird part about it is where he's buried in the Northwest Territories now. The ground is in permafrost, and the body's totally preserved in the permafrost. They dug him up about 1990 or so to do some DNA testing on him, and it still came back as inconclusive. They don't know who he is or where he came from. Really interesting history. And I honestly believe he could be possibly Scott. It's just nobody really knows, and it hasn't been confirmed. Let me see, what else can I yabber on about here? Got some gold panning stories. I can tell you some hunting stories. Up here in Northern Canada, you got to hunt, you got to fish. The stuff you get in the grocery store isn't as good as something you can shoot and kill yourself. I tell you what. And I'm an avid hunter. I got Aboriginal background. I'm a Métis, which is a half breed. Something I take great pride in. My father used to take me on hunting when I was a child, and it was some of the best bonding I've experienced with that man. I miss my dad, so he passed away a couple of years ago now, and I like to continue the tradition with my daughter. And some of the moose hunting stories I can tell you are pretty phenomenal. Just the areas, the scenery, the mountains, the cool fall mornings. It's just beautiful. It's really neat. You try to sneak into this wild sphere of life and go in unnoticed and participate in it, and it's wonderful. Harvesting an animal, to me, it's an emotional thing. You feel really sad that you took down an animal because you took in a life, but that life is going to be feeding you. And it's really important. No, Mr. Lodak, I don't even think I even assigned any moderators to this, and being so new to this, I don't even know how to do it. Let's see. There we go. Hey, Mr. Lodak, I added you as a moderator. There you go. Thank you. I think you're in there if you want to add the next link for the next person there. There you go, buddy. Might as well pick somebody who's been around a long time doing this kind of thing. Yeah. So hunting a moose, it's interesting. You're going out there early in the morning. You're quiet. You're stealthy. You're not trying to be seen. You're not trying to be heard. And you got to be aware of wind direction. A moose has such a ginormous nose. They got ears the size of a satellite dish. The only thing they don't have going for them is well-defined eyesight. They see movement very well, but they don't see shapes very well. So as long as you're standing still, you can have a moose almost walk up to you as long as it doesn't smell you or hear you. And I've had some interesting encounters with wildlife. When I was a younger fellow too, I was out by hunting camp. We had a moose hanging in the trees, and that's what you do to cool it, right? You hang it, age your meat a bit. And I was in the back there looking for a grouse. I had a 22 rifle with me, and here comes a grizzly bear. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to avoid this situation. I'm going to climb up a really thick spruce tree. And I climbed up the spruce tree and I made it about 12 feet up before I got the bear's attention. And then he got really interested in me and started to come after me and go up the tree behind me. And, being like a 10-year-old boy with a 22 and only 50 rounds, I shot at the bear. It was less than 5 feet away from me and I was 15 feet up a tree. And it would open its mouth, and I'd put a couple shots in there, and the thing would walk away and come back and be angry. It was very ineffective. I went through the entire 50 rounds on that one bear trying to stay alive, and it got to the point where my dad could hear the commotion in the back there because it was only 300 yards away from camp, and he came back in there. The bear charged at him. He ran back to camp, grabbed his rifle, and went back out there and disposed of the bear. And when after the bear had been deceased, we looked at and examined the animal, and his lower jaw, I shot it with a 22, but it wasn't even enough to break the bones in the bear's head. I chipped a few teeth, and that was the extent of it. Even at the top of his mouth where the bullets went, it dented the skin, but it didn't even go through the top of the palate into the nose cavity, into the sinuses. Like, those things are so damn tough. It was a real eye opener as to how fragile the human body is compared to wildlife. I've gone out moose hunting before. I've gotten a moose that had been through, must have been through one heck of a fight. One of its ears was torn, like in ribboned out. It had several puncture wounds on it, had all sorts of bubbles and sores from previous wounds that had healed, and some time too. Like, this moose took a thumping, a beating, and lived for several years until I shot it. And even then, when I shot it, this thing had been scrapping to the point where some of his antlers were flexed and fractured, and some of them had broken off. Like, I've been to places where I've been calling moose, and you go back then the next day, and you can see where that they have scrapped over the night. I'm going to show you guys a broken antler. That there is from a moose scrapping. It broke the antler clean off. We're talking, about an animal that's well over 1,000 pounds, fighting away. And to go up there the next morning and see an animal is pretty interesting. On that morning, we found that antler. Me and my friend, we went out, and I told him about I went out there calling the previous day. He arrived that evening. We're going to go back out there the next morning. We get out there, and the road was just torn asunder. We find these broken antlers. There was no signs of any other wildlife. So I'm assuming that the moose either heard us, smelled us, and they weren't going to come up and play. So after about 2 hours of waiting for a moose to hopefully come out and play, we decided to go for a little bit of a drive up a hill where our cell phones would work, and we'd be able to call our significant others and let them know what was going on. And we're driving down the road, and there's a moose on the road. Now, about a week before, I put a new scope on my rifle. I sighted it all in. It was shooting good. So when we seen this moose on the road, I got out of it. I chambered around, and I proceeded to shoot at this moose. And I did not hit the moose. It was walking away from us. So the only thing I had was the hindquarters and the back of its head and neck to shoot at. And I put, I think, 4 rounds at this moose before I gave up at it. My friend Ben, he got out of the vehicle, and he decided, I told him, if you got the shot, take it. And he was hesitant. I used my empty magazine, my clip, to remove the scope, flipped up the open sights, reloaded my rifle, and I shot the moose with the open sights. And the shell, the bullet went through the back of the neck, through the spinal cord. On the other side of the spinal cord, it cut the jugular and busted the jaw. And the moose, basically, it seeing how it severed the femur, or the artery in the neck, it bled out through its mouth, and it collapsed immediately. And we get there, it's nice to ascertain and make sure the animal is not moving, not breathing. You don't want to suffer. If it's suffering, you dispose of it, right? You don't want that on your head or on your hands. And the moose was definitely dead. And so we went back to camp and told my dad and his hunting partner, and we all came back up there and dealt with the animal. And it was a good hunting story. It was one of the last moose I ever shot with my dad. I miss the old fella quite a bit. It was those times I really cherish. And as a kid, I wish I was into gold panning at a younger age. It's something I find so interesting. Geology, mineralogy, just being in nature is really, really good. So I think we're almost ready to wrap this one up. So I hope I got some new subscribers out of this, and the previous subscribers. I hope you have a chance to dive into my channel, because I've been making content for some time, and I've had some ups and downs. I got my claim on the Nation River all set up. I built a beautiful camp down there. I hauled all these steel boxes down there, and then I had a forest fire rip through there, and I lost everything. My beautiful high banker that was made by Paul Jarvis, Adventures in Gold Prospecting, had a beautiful 10-inch high banker. The guy is just, fantastic builder. I love that machine. It was just a great high banker. Camping gear, tents, food, cooking stuff, everything, mining gear, winches, solar power, everything was all cooked and burnt. And all those videos are in my channel. You guys can have a good look back and see what's going on. And thank you for the opportunity today, and thank you, Ed. This has been really good, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else's contributions. So that one, I'm signing out. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the show, and dive into the channel, see what's out there I've done, and leave some comments, watch some videos, let me know what you think, what you like, and I'll try to cater to my audience and give you guys what you need. So with that one, I'm out of here, and I'm ending the stream. Bye, guys.